Hello and welcome to England on 99.94, the home of cricket audio. I'm Daniel Norcross, commentator, occasional writer, wibbler and winger, and also host of Zero Ducks Given podcast, if you're interested. And I am joined, as I always am, and I'm very delighted to say, by Chief Cricket Correspondent of the Press Association, Rory Dollard. We are your home for all England content. We'll be right here several times every week discussing, well, England. You can find us in your favourite podcast apps on YouTube or in our 99.94 app. Thanks for joining Cricket's Conversation. And today, well, in the aftermath of an extraordinary test match in many ways, we are going to talk about the method. Are we in Ben ball, not Baz ball? We're going to talk about Ollie Robinson, his return after months away. And what a great return it was. And finally, of course, we have to talk about the elephant in the room 3 times. We're talking about Ben Stokes, the batter, Ben Stokes, the bowler, and Ben Stokes, the captain. So quite a bit to fit in. Rory, let's begin with the approach, I guess, just to fill everyone in. If you've been living under a rock somewhere, England overturned the 1-0 deficit to make it 1-1 from the first Test match, which they lost by an innings and 12 runs. This Test match, they won by an innings and 81 runs.
85, perhaps.
Something preposterous. 85, it might have been. Yeah, I think you're right. Innings and 85 runs. And it was done at a fair lick, batted around about 4 and over, just under 3.8. So there were sort of hints of the method we've become used to. But they got ahead. They got ahead of South Africa early, and then they actually sort of ground them into the dust thanks to an absolutely fantastic, record-breaking 6-wicket partnership at Old Trafford between the two Ben Foakes and Ben Stokes. And it was all a bit curious in that it was quite like familiar cricket breaking out, Rory.
It was. It's interesting, isn't it, that the sort of the narrative shift is that last week they lost at Lord's because they went a bit too, the Baz ball experiment blew up in their face, some people would tell you, and that this week they reined it back. Well, last week they scored at 3.6 in defeat, and today they rein it back in and slam the brakes on and score at 4.1. So it's not, I suppose you need to sort of interrogate the whole matter a little bit more quietly. And actually, what they did do is they just played sensible with the bat in hand. They played sensible cricket, which meant when the time was there for them to stick in the game and blunt and block and absorb and do all those things that their assistant coach Paul Collingwood made a career out of, they did it. They just did it. They didn't feel. And I think the best thing about how they played, and Ben Stokes after the match called it a benchmark performance for his side, and I thought that was an excellent choice of words, because what came before wasn't something that they could expect to hang their hat on. The idea that they would always chase down the best part of 400 in the fourth innings was lovely, and it was a nice fantasy to live in for a while, but it wasn't anything like sustainable or real life. So to see them manage a game of cricket in a bit more of a sober fashion was really quite encouraging, because it meant that Baz ball is a button they can press in the future, but it's not their only gear. It's a mindset they can choose to live into. And actually, Stokes' innings really was the metric of that, wasn't it? Because he made a really solid, it might have been his slowest 50, I think. It might have been his slowest half century for England.
Took
101 balls.
I think the one at Headingley probably beats that, because his first 2 runs came in about 70 balls or something ridiculous.
But a pretty workmanlike grafter's innings for his 50, and then he scored his next 50 off 50 near enough a run a ball, and he started hitting the stands.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, I think we've got to go back a little bit before that partnership to see how the method slightly changed, which was that when England were 3 down, having bowled South Africa out for a very modest total, 151, and having spent an inordinate amount of this summer talking about how the balls dramatically change in behaviour after 40 overs. And it's so consistent. It's really bizarre just watching the stats, watching the speeds of the ball off the pitch, actually, after 40 overs, it's almost like these balls are all exactly the same. They all behave really quite nicely to start with, and then at 40 overs, they go on a huff and say, no, we're not playing ball. And what they had done in the past when they found themselves up against quite a small total against New Zealand at Lords, they bowled them out quite cheaply and then went out to bat themselves. When they lost a few wickets, they went hard at it. Stokes went really hard in that innings at Lords. What was different here was that at 41 for 3, I think it was, Crawley and Bairstow came together. And Crawley, despite what we've been told about, impact player, we're not expecting him to be consistent, he batted like somebody who was trying to prove his credentials as a consistent opener. And his partnership with Bairstow, Crawley made 38 off 102 balls. First time he's faced over 100 balls since his century. And Bairstow's 49, which was done at a decent lick with occasional bits of counter-attacking, but it wasn't very rash. That took the ball deep, so that when they lost the two of them, one after the other quite quickly, the ball was 36 overs old when Foakes and Stokes came together. So the task, I think, became a bit more clear, didn't it? It was, if we dig in for 15 overs, I mean, actually 5, but if you dig in for 15 overs and you're in, then it's devilishly difficult for the South African pace attack to get anything out of it. And because we saw that pattern actually replicated when England came to bowl. And I thought it was a fascinating contrast between the two styles of play. The way that England would have approached South Africa's predicament would have been a little bit the way they approached their second innings in the first test at Lords. And it could have come unstuck. But South Africa didn't give themselves a chance. By padding up and just patting Jack Leach back to the bowler for 15 overs for 16 runs at the time when the ball was soft, Keegan Peterson, I think, missed a massive trick, and he needed to counter-attack, because if you stick in at 1.5 and over, the second new ball comes round and you're still miles behind. Whereas I think the England approach would have been to have a go, and had they failed, then they would have lost. Had they gone at 1.5 and over, they know they would have lost anyway, because then they'd have been facing the might of Nortje and Rabada with a new ball.
But I suppose the change of pace, the shift in tone was, the Crawley innings was two separate parts, really. You said he scored 38 off 100 and whatever balls, but actually it was the 17 runs in 77 balls on day one. What happened the next morning was really by the by, to be honest. He was worked over a wee bit and he didn't look like really going on to a big one, but he just hung in, and he got a lot of praise from that for England. So I think the idea that had started to form, that he would be told to just keep on driving, keep on swinging, baby, and we'll never tell you off. It was his message was actually not work. That isn't working. And Stokes did say, for all the fact that at the end of Lords he said, "I'll tell you what we did wrong here. We didn't go hard enough, and we're going to look at that." They worked out really quickly, and he said that we just worked out that wasn't a pitch to do that. And I suppose I was thinking about it, and if sort of those first 4 tests of the summer were like a bit of a holiday fling, when you're meeting somebody new in some hot, lovely island somewhere, and it's all pina coladas. That's kind of what those first 4 tests were.
Where's this going, Rory? Where's this going?
It was all flirty fun, wasn't it? And it was all lovely for the first 4 tests. And then this weekend was them finding out that they could have a nice time together playing board games in a caravan. That's where it's going. And maybe it's a relationship that's got legs.
Well, maybe. I mean, we need to have some words, I think, about Ben Foakes, because he hasn't had. I mean, look, he starred in the first Test match victory at Lords in that partnership with Root against New Zealand, which had sort of kicked off this whole revolution, when England actually only went at about 3.5 runs and over, but it seemed unusually speedy, in large part because Foakes went incredibly slowly in that partnership with Root that got England over the line. In this occasion, his partnership with Stokes, he actually started, I'm not going to say the more aggressive, but the more fluent. And he got that partnership going at a time when it could have been a bit stodgy, because Stokes was struggling to find his range, really. And I know that we've said it already, the ball was 40 overs old and beyond and had gone soft, but it was a very impressive innings because he then ended up facing the second new ball. Incidentally, only the second time this summer that England have faced a second new ball. The only other time was when they were on the road at Trent Bridge, replying to 550 odd by New Zealand. Every other innings has been done and dusted within 80 overs. So he ended up having to face second new ball, and I think that's going to help give him an enormous confidence, isn't it? It's only his second Test century, and he got his first on debut.
And I think we can. It's only a few days since we did a podcast, and we floated whether there was a sort of a horses for courses situation where you could ease Foakes out the team, not permanently, but at some point to get Harry Brook in. Forget it, that's gone. There's no chance. Ben Stokes speaking to him at the post match here. It's not. It wasn't a case that he was pumping up Foakes' tyres when he was speaking about him earlier in the summer. He is all in on this guy, and he's going nowhere. He is absolutely locked in Ben Stokes' team. I'm quite sure of that. And it's interesting as well, isn't it, that he spent a long time, Ben Foakes, out the team because everyone knew he was a fantastic gloveman, but we really had to gamble on Josh Butler's quality with the bat, and he played 57 tests, got 2 centuries. Ben Foakes is sitting on 2 centuries after, 16?
Yes. And the reason why we're thinking about people like Josh Butler is because of the impact that they could make. So we were sort of anticipating Bazball with Josh Butler in the side before Bazball had been invented. It's very curious how these things come about. Anyway, it was a stomping win. It was an extraordinary win, and it was, well, let's put it this way. It's the marvels of Test cricket that 1 minute England have been completely found out by a vastly superior attack.
Top of the world Test Championship.
Side, top of the world. South Africa are going somewhere, and England are going to find trouble. And then, before you know it, Dean Elgar has got all the headaches.
As a coda to that, I'd just say, sorry, but I mean, we could talk it in circles as long as we want. They picked the wrong team and they ballsed up the toss. That's also what happened this week.
Well, that's absolutely true. Where was Marco Jansen, and why on earth, having bowled under slate grey skies at Lords and it really worked, wouldn't you do the same thing at Headingley in at Old Trafford, very similar circumstances, very, very similar muggy weather. Now, 99.94 is more than just this podcast. Jared Kimber has Red Inca. That focuses on deep cricket topics from the global game. There's also Double Century, a look at the history of the game. There are many other podcasts. Go over and listen to the West Indies on 99.94. Podcast. That's a podcast for cricket's best Caribbean coverage. Listen to India on 99.94. Considered analysis from 2 professionals. England on 99.94 has the north and south of the game covered with me and Rory. South Africa on 99.94 is looking at the radically changing nature of cricket in the Rainbow Nation. Find them all in our podcast apps on YouTube or via the 99.94 app. Now, the second part of today's offering, we need to have a look at Ollie Robinson. We need to talk about this man because he's out of the side, effectively out of the side since the Ashes, really. He looked terribly unfit towards the back end. He got appalling criticism, actually, for the way he got out at Hobart. It was almost like, with the game absolutely done and dusted, and he's the 10th wicket to fall. England haven't got a prayer in the game, but the picture of him with 1 foot in Hobart International Airport and his bat waving in the forlorn direction of a ball that he was nowhere near seemed to be emblematic
like a dirty
of
protest,
England's Ashes. It did, yeah. It was it was a capitulation. It was horrible, but it also, people I think got it into their head that this showed that Robinson needed to be reformed, despite being the standout bowler for England last summer, and despite giving England a point of difference. I mean, there's a second highest release point in world cricket behind Carl Jamieson. A great exponent of wobble seam, but people were getting on his back. His speeds were down. He didn't look necessarily as trim as other fast bowlers do. Well, he came back with a bang after Matthew Potts had a pretty awkward time at Lords. Potts looked a little bit scratchy. In comes Robinson, on the money straight away. He was the best bowler in that first innings. Only got 1 for 40 odd, but he was beating the bat time and time again. Got his rewards in the second innings. Terrific with the new ball. He was metronomically accurate, just as Potts had been, actually, when he first came into the side for the first four Test matches. It it's lovely to watch, isn't it? And crucially, the speeds. I mean, even when Robinson was taking those wickets in his first summer, he was not bowling at 86 miles an hour.
Yeah, I think it's hard to underestimate the question marks that were over this guy in the last 6 months, 7 months since he played at Hobart. It's very highly unusual for a member of the England coaching staff to come out and bury someone, really, and I guess give them the electric shock treatment in public, not behind closed doors. And that's what John Lewis did, the bowling coach. Came out and told to the cameras, this guy is not fit enough and it's not good enough really for Test cricket or for our standards. And in a team that has the standards set by Jimmy Anderson and Stuart Broad on fitness, dedication, that stuff, professionalism, it was a pretty big black mark against him. He then got the chance in the West Indies to lead the attack with those two guys sitting at home. Pretty miffed about it. And he got back spasms. And that's a bit, that rings alarm bells. And he was supposedly going to be fit for the second test, wasn't. He was going to be fit for the third test, wasn't. And he was doing these lunchtime walks with the physio around the grounds in the West Indies. And he looked hangdog. And for all the class and quality and skill that he showed with the ball last summer, he looked like a guy who might not be cut out for Test cricket. And it might not happen for him. It really did look like that. And then, he had a disrupted start to this summer. Matthew Potts steals his breakfast by doing what he'd done last year. And I think people were really questioning it. But it turns out Ben Stokes had a bit of a chat with him, and we could probably talk about that when we talk about Ben's captaincy a bit more. But he laid it on the line for him. The relationship with John Lewis is better than people maybe realise because they knew each other from Sussex. And that was maybe a bit of tough love when he did that. And Ollie Robinson has worked hard. He's doubled down. He's impressed Ben Stokes with his fitness work and that's not easily done. And he's come back and bowled really, really nicely. Finished the game off in style. He's got a smile on his face, and I didn't know I'd see a smile on his face again.
No.
But he was, he looked pretty grumpy with his lot when I saw him pacing around, getting his 10,000 steps in Grenada. And now there's no reason to think that England don't have a player for the long term here. And we spoke to him after the match, a couple of us, and he owned it pretty much. And it's not easy done. These are things professional athletes don't like to talk about, least of all with a bunch of unfit journalists. But he said I had a bit to do. I really did, and I acknowledged that, and I understood that, and I've done it. And he described himself as a gym freak in the making. He said, I've started to.
Ooh.
He said, I've started to enjoy.
He said,
I've started to enjoy it and look forward to it. And realize that this is a positive in my life. And importantly, he also said, and I'm well aware that this journey isn't over, and I've got to do more and get stronger and fitter to be bowling at 35, 36 like Stuart Broad and Jimmy Anderson are. So loads of positives there. And with that height, with that bounce he gets, with the sort of delicate skills that he has that maybe someone like Philander or Abbas who got the ball to work for them when there was not a lot in it and when there wasn't much pace coming through, he could be a real important bowler for England in these next years to come. So it's a bit of a win, this, because there was a chance that we were losing Ollie Robinson as an option, and he's come back, he's smiling, he's bowling well, and his body's holding up. So good news.
I mean, for people who aren't really aware of him, what his most potent threat is really is his incredible control of seam and length. And with the height, we saw it with the new ball, the extra bounce surprises the batter because it's not coming particularly fast, even when he's bowling at 84, 85, 86. These batters are used to, especially the South Africans, they're used to facing Nortje and Rabada and Ngidi in the net. So it's not the pace itself, it's the lateness of that movement. Because he hits the seam so often, it forces batters to make choices in a very, very much smaller amount of time after the ball pitches. And it's quite reminiscent, actually, of Glenn McGrath. I mean, you're not going to put him in that category because Glenn McGrath is one of the greatest bowlers of all time, took 560-odd wickets. But that's what his weapon is. His weapon isn't extravagant swing. His weapon isn't extravagant pace. It's just a relentlessness and a variation. And of course, the wobble seam. He's a terrific exponent of the wobble seam. But I just want to put something out there, and I don't know whether this is true, but because there are plenty of incredibly fit county cricketers out there. But the county grind, which Ollie Robinson had been on, he's a late developer, came into I say late developer, he was a late pick. He was 27 when he was picked? He had played his cricket in county cricket, and there's a lot of matches you play in county cricket, a lot of 4-day games, and I don't know how much opportunity there was for him to work on his fitness. I put that another way. There would be opportunity, but how much motivation there would have been to work on his fitness, because he was bashing out the wickets, bashing out the lines and lengths, happily taking wickets at 78, 79 miles an hour.
This is the thing.
And in a strange kind of way, being in the international setup has given him the chance, because he can see from working alongside people like Ben Stokes, Jimmy Anderson, Joe Root, but especially the bowlers, Jack Leach. I mean, Jack Leach works so hard on his fitness. And I imagine, first you get the opportunity to work on that a lot more, because you've got a lot of time off between games. And secondly, there's the shame of it, isn't there? We've all got to take our clothes off in a changing room, and you're looking around and go, bloody hell, Jack Leach is ripped. And your self-perception.
You don't have to do it in the press box, though, Dan, by the way. That taking your clothes off in the press box, that's personal preference on your part, that.
Yeah, well, it's when I see you, I become so extraordinarily warm. Yeah. I can't explain it.
Listen, what I would say with Ollie as well, though, is probably he encountered a problem that he hadn't before, because those spells where he drops to 73, 72 miles an hour that he was doing in the Ashes, he probably gets away with that in county cricket. And the pitches maybe give him just enough to hide those spells. Figures look nice. Speed guns aren't out everywhere. And he comes to international cricket, he comes to test cricket, he comes to Ashes cricket, and that isn't going to work. He's got to be up there at his top speed all the time. So it was probably a bit of a cold sort of slap in the face for him, really. And he's reacted really nicely.
He has, and fair play, because he's also operating with an absolutely miserable ball once it gets over 40 overs. So it was even more important that he did that work. Anyway, we shall move on. If you love cricket and want to hear more, well, head over to the 99.94 app. You can hear all our podcasts and also our commentary. We are the home of cricket audio online, where we're adding new shows and covering series. And the best way to follow us is via our app or on social media at 99.94 DM. Welcome to Cricket's Conversation. And the third and last part of today's programme, we have to talk about Ben Stokes. Batting, bowling, captaining. I want to kick off with that 14-over spell, because there were so many mad things about it. Right? But I believe one of the greatest spells of fast bowling I've ever encountered took place in the Jubilee Test of 1980, when Ian Botham in Mumbai, Bombay as was, it's not a cool place necessarily, bowled 26 and a half overs from memory, unchanged from the beginning of the innings to the end, and he didn't stop bowling until India were bowled out. Now, Ben Stokes has bowled the 3 longest spells of anybody in this country in the last 10 years who's a seam bowler, anybody who counts as a quick or seam bowler. 14 overs, I know, 20 minutes of tea, so he had a moderate breather.
He was probably on an exercise bike
when he was batting.
Tea. There's no, he'd have been doing chin-ups or something.
Well, he couldn't have allowed the knee to seize up apart from anything else. It jarred the knee when he was batting, more of which we'll talk about shortly. But then, with what must have been, 28 overs to go until a second new ball was available, instead of doing what he has done on other occasions, what other England captains would definitely do in that situation, which is burgle 7 or 8 overs from Root, get a load of overs in from Leach, maybe bowl 5 or 6 yourself. He just took the ball, saw that it was reverse swinging. He spoke to me at the end of play yesterday and said, I spoke to Joe Root. I always speak to Joe Root to find out when he thinks the ball's reversing. And, I time my arrival into the attack to do that grunt work. I wanted to make sure that Robinson and Anderson were as fit, as firing and ready for it as humanly possible when the second new ball became available. And he bowled the ugly, nasty overs. I promise you, with this ball, overs 52 to 80, no one wants to bowl with that. I mean, Jack Leach doesn't want to bowl with it, even on a turning track, because there's no pace to work with. The ball is just not turning, it's not gripping. So what does he do? He just thunders in over after over. And I was on commentary and I was on highlights. I kept on teeing up the end of his over and say, at the end of his 10th over, it's his
Totting up the
spell
spell,
of 10 overs. He'll surely now come off, and we'll just have to see. I mean, Joe Root's just going to have to see it out, or Jack Leach through to the 80th over, and he's on again. Yeah. And I tee it up at the end of every over. And in the end, it's just, well, he's just going to bowl through to the 80th, isn't he? And what a mammoth performance that was. And to pick up the 2 wickets, England were probably going to win that game anyway because of the way South Africa played. But not just to break the partnership, but then to bowl a snorter of a ball to get rid of
the best ball you could bowl with that, but with that old rag.
Oh, unbelievable it was.
So I think,
that absolutely flew. Speak to me, Rory. How is it possible?
There was 2 elements, wasn't there, really, to the Stokes spell? And one was, it was really skillful. It was someone who has an ability with the ball to do that reverse swing, but mix it with a bit of short stuff and a bit of aggression. And he's the England bowler who can get up your nose a bit. But it was also the bloody-minded graft. And in England, the country that cheers defenders for kicking the ball over the roof more than they do for springing an offside trap, we like it. And I think the fans loved seeing him gnarl and sweat and grimace through a really tough thing just as much as they liked him. He
was literally covered in dirt.
Oh, he was filthy. I know. He's like my 7-year-old son after he's gone to the park to play footy.
Oh, it was fantastic. One ball he sort of fell over, and I thought, no wonder you're fallen over. You're in like your 12th over of this spell. Great. What the hell are you doing, man? And he's landed in the dirt, and then he gets up. He doesn't even dust himself down. He's just covered in dust and bits of grass, and he's big breath. Back you go. You're right. It was like get the big man. It was like all those, the Lions of Turin. What he really needed was a sort of gash on his forehead, and then it would have been complete.
Yeah. So I mean, we're already a week or so on from where we talked about Steve Harmison sounding the alarm for him bowling himself into retirement. Well, I mean, we're going to find out one way or the other because he's not going to put himself in bubble wrap, is he? We're going to see those spells as and when he thinks they're required. I think we can get away without talking too much about the batting. I do, because we've kind of mentioned it at the top about how he went through 2 phases and that. And we know about his batting. It was his first 100 as captain. So it was important. And it was important that he didn't continually charge the seamers and get 15 and put a stop to that silliness, because he's so good. And he could have, in a different life, batted 3 for England for 100 tests, never bowled a ball, and averaged 48. I don't know. He's that good. So it was important that he didn't just be silly. But I think that we should talk about his captaincy.
Just one last thing on his batting though. He batted quite like he batted at Trent Bridge, and he didn't get to 100 that day because Bairstow went berserk. And I just wonder how much he jarred his knee very soon after coming in. Actually, when he took a run,
16, I think.
And it was just before noon because they took drinks. It was just before noon. He'd only been in for 20 minutes, half an hour or so on that second day, and he jarred the knee. And just like he did at Trent Bridge after he jarred the knee, I think it affected his mobility, obviously. So he was less inclined to come charging down, and it just kept him in his crease for that little while longer. One other little factoid you might like: it's only the 5th time, if you exclude Alex Stewart, that a captain and a wicketkeeper for England have both scored 100.
Right.
Very famously, Alan Knott and Tony Gray did it in 1976. Les Ames did it with a captain I can't remember. Godfrey Evans did it with Len Hutton. Pryor did it with Strauss. And now Stokes and Foakes go into folklore. But yes, let's move on to his captaincy, because it was, a lot of it was him taking centre stage with bat, with ball, also in the field, but the tinkering in the field, I love it. I love the fact he cannot go 3 balls without a change. And that's not a criticism. It's actually really entertaining to watch, because we speculate all the time. I dare say you're doing it in the press box, in the commentary box, just turning and going, oh, there's been 3 forward defensive prods from Peterson. He's not going to like that. He's going to need to change
Gully
something.
must be
What do you
coming
reckon
soon,
he's
yeah.
going to do, Finney? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's very entertaining. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, he's always, that must be, whether it's a McCullum influence or it's a Stokes thing, that he's been sitting there prowling around for a few years thinking, why do we have the same field for 6 balls? How boring, and whether he's got his hands on the wheel now. But I suppose, the thing that I've been really impressed with as Stokes is, and it isn't something you would have been certain would have been part of his makeup as captain, but it's the soft skills. He went out of his way when he announced the team to drop Matthew Potts in a press conference. Didn't do it on the toss, did it the day before, and he gave him such a big rap. Said, this kid's gone from being a county bowler to part of the England team. He's not in the team this week, but he's in. Pumped his tyres up again. This guy's missing out on a Test match and feeling great about himself. Good stuff. He gets hold of Ollie Robinson and he gives him the new ball. He doesn't. He sits Stuart Broad back because he's watched the Lions game. He knows that if he's going to get what he needs to get out of Ollie Robinson, it's going to be first up. So he gets hold of Stuart Broad and asks him to not open the bowling. Well, that's what Stuart Broad does. He always opens the bowling. He has since 1800. It's.
Yeah,
and it works.
Well, Stuart Broad. Just to add to that, Rory. This was the first Test match since 2009 at the Oval when Broad came on as the 5th bowler.
Right.
Now, in that game, famously, he ran through the Australians and won the Ashes for England. But that gives you an idea. Broad bowling as a 5th bowler, and the funkiness of Joe Root
opening the bowling
first up on the 3rd
with
day
a 9 over ball,
and it's all. Yeah, with a 9 overall ball because he wanted it to reverse quickly, I think. Is anything I can think of. We thought it was an end change, but when Root bowled the second over, he's like, he's going to scuff it up a bit and get it to reverse. And yeah, exactly. The way you say pump the tyres, he did it with Foakes.
Yeah.
He did that thing when he was his player of the match and he said it shouldn't have been me, should have been Foakes. The positivity, I had to do a number of post-match interviews, for the highlights. And you're sort of skirting around. You don't want to ask the inane question, which is, what is Bazball? What's changed? What's this and the other? But you come at it from different angles, and it's always how positive they all feel about anything that happens, about any decision that takes place on the field or off the field. And that's a hell of a skill to pull off.
That's what I mean. He appears to be a really instinctive, sympathetic captain. Like, he seems to understand what his players need from him. And so I think Matthew Potts will be better for being dropped this week because they did it the right way. I think Robinson's better for being brought back and given the new ball and not just taking his defined place in the pecking order. I wonder if Stuart Broad's better for being brought into the tent and been told he was part of this decision and you're doing this for the team. He seemed happy about it. He was never stopped giving advice at mid-on. He wasn't demoted. He was given this new role and felt part of it. Stokes, Ben Foakes, like you say, he's started to get a tune. It's a weird tune and it's a bit discordant out of Stuart Broad, the batter, again for the first time in a million years by coming out with all this absolute flim flam about Nighthawk, which has never been used he's never been used in this fictional position yet. But Stuart Broad's...
Well, no one has. Rory, no one's been using this. I interviewed Broad the first day, and he had his pads on, and I said, "So I say you were padded up with 25 minutes to go." And I said, "What was the thinking?" He said, "Well, if we lost a 4th wicket, then we really would be behind, so we would need to counterpunch. So my role would have then been to come in and try and slap 20, 25 runs quickly to put South Africa on the back foot. And what if you got out? What if you got out, Stuart? He says, well, Jack Leach was padded up to come in and be night watchman if I got out. So they were literally going to use him as a kind of shock tactic.
So, but that's what I mean. Like
and that's brilliant.
With these sort of gambits, he's getting stuff out of people. He's turned Stuart Broad's descent as a batsman into a weird, perverse positive. And this is good. I mean, he just appears to be a really instinctive, natural, understanding captain who is getting the players that he wants to get the right things out of them. And that's why who knows who they'll ask to play for them, whether Moeen Ali will go to Pakistan, whether these people will ever get another chance, Liam Livingstone, someone like that. But, geez, the way Stokes is carrying on, I feel like anything's up for grabs with these guys if they come in. What we'll see out of them could be anything, because he is getting these people to do things that he wants them to do through his handling of them. And I don't know if people realised that he was going to be such a sensitive captain.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think what he's done is he's tapping into what people are good at and encouraging them to do that. And like any director, if you ask a director for notes, a really good director will not tell you what you're bad at. He'll tell you what you're good at, or she, and encourage you to do more of the good things. We're going to leave it there for today. Thanks for listening to England Cricket on 99.94. Please do rate us, review, subscribe. You can download the 99.94 app from where you get your apps, and you can follow us personally on Twitter or Instagram on, in my case, at Norcross Cricket, as in neither angry nor cross cricket, or at Go For It Rory.
The RVD. THERVD.
THE.
That's where you're finding
RVD. We'll put links up for everything we do there on this podcast and beyond. Also, follow our network at 99.94 DM on social media. Remember, if you love cricket, then we are the home of cricket audio. Follow for podcasts and commentary from the bat and ball world. Thanks for joining Cricket's Conversation at 99.94. For now, goodbye.